So here's some things I'd like you to think about doing tomorrow based on these ideas we presented today. First and foremost is consider Agile and Enterprise Agile for your organization. If you're not doing it, you need to be thinking this way. You need to find some ways to introduce these concepts. Whichever flavor you choose, I don't really care, but you need to find ways to get Agile integrated into your organization somehow. You've got to find a way to design the Agile governance lifecycle for any scale of Agile in your enterprise. So if you've just got an initial Agile pilot going on, this lean Agile governance approach will let a single Agile pilot perform and govern accordingly in a way that will still ensure they can deliver. It'll let you take Agile applied to a program or a project and apply it so that the program or the project can be successful by implementing this idea and the ideas of Agile pre-governance. And absolutely, for enterprise or scaled Agile, we know that this idea will work to help enable Agile on a much broader scale at the enterprise level to succeed. So another thing to do tomorrow is implement the scaled Agile governance lifecycle and all of the supporting requirements, artifacts, processes, and roles. So that means the Agile governance buffer zone and the three-tiered organizational design. That means the governance backlog artifact and process. That means the role of the Agile governance owner who will facilitate all this governance and activity, and ensuring that you have Agile pre-governance of governance requirements so that no sprint team has to be held up because they're waiting for a governance decision to be made. That's what we're saying when we say this third bullet here, implement scaled Agile governance lifecycle. Next is more broadly, look at the whole event-driven governance paradigm, the concepts and the framework and the approach, and take a look at that as a model for all of the other IT governance requirements. Because what we find and what we believe is the art of the possible is that you can collapse, streamline, simplify all of your IT governance processes down and, to a 30, you can reduce your governance footprint, if you will, 40 to 50%, because we believe you can streamline these processes and have them as a shared governance mechanism that will work for lots of governance requirements, rather than erecting governance silos for very specific governance requirements. And more importantly, we can integrate those two governance triangles of compliance and risk, and then the project-centric governance things into a single framework so it's not confusing. Last, I would say that you need to consider a three-speed IT strategy going forward that will integrate scaled Agile, DevOps, and cloud such that, again, you can deliver on an end-to-end model, and that's called faster. And again, the argument for that is I think it's compelling, and I think it's probably obvious to the folks that are on the webinar. But what's the sense of doing Agile delivery or scaled Agile if you still have to wait for the infrastructure to get provisioned to the project? What's the sense of doing scaled Agile if I can't get the application rapidly provisioned over by the IT operations people? So, it just seems like it makes complete sense that you combine scaled Agile, DevOps, and cloud to provision the various cloud infrastructure and platform and application infrastructure requirements into the project at the speed of cloud. You put all of these things together, these three ideas, you end up with faster IT. I think it's as compelling as can be. So we would say that based on this things to do tomorrow list, you should think about developing this enterprise Agile governance roadmap for your organization as a priority. If you do, you have the opportunity to do what I said before, and I'm going to go up to make this point, to turn those iron triangles of governance into connected gears that harmonize and work in lockstep And you'll be amazed at how much easier and simpler IT governance processes can be. So there's lots of ways that we can help work with different organizations to look at some of these ideas. Again, I'll reiterate, if you haven't seen it, come back to our website, find the Lean Governance Manifesto white paper, read it. If I see that you download it, what we'll do is we'll send you the webinar PowerPoint that accompanies it, and that'll help you understand the broader principles of event-driven governance that are, again, described in the Lean Governance Manifesto. Caution, this is about a 21-page white paper. Now, you're going to receive the Agile Governance white paper after today. That's 26 pages. It's long. It's detailed. But it helps explain exactly how this kind of a model can be successfully implemented in your organization. So while it's 26 pages, it's a good read for an airplane. So read that as the foundation, and then there's ways in which we can help you consider lean governance ideas for your organization. I would say look at, if you're doing Agile now at any scale, do an Agile process assessment to see how it's performing internally to the pure Agile process you're following, whatever it might be, but also do this Agile process assessment to see where IT governance processes are slowing you down. If we can identify those friction points, we can nuke them and replace them with this scaled Agile governance framework and event-driven governance. So you need to do this process assessment to understand its organic internal performance and how it's connecting to interfacing with other governance processes that may be slowing it down. Third, pilot. Now, this model that I'm describing has not been implemented anywhere. We've implemented event-driven governance in lots of places, but the scaled Agile governance framework implementation of it has not been applied yet. So we want to pilot it, but you would also pilot it no matter what for your organization to see how well some of these ideas work. So pilot it in your organization, pilot the artifacts, the processes, and the roles, and have a before and after set of metrics so you can tell how well it performed. Next, we have our enterprise governance playbook is a master methodology we use for all things governance. So that gives us kind of a master roadmap of doing the analysis, design, and implementation of these kinds of governance frameworks. So that's a master kind of a reference methodology that we can offer up to facilitate these kinds of ideas. And at the end of the day, as I've said, we can help you get to this 3-speed IT model called FASTER, because we also have our cloud practice and we know how to work with DevOps kinds of ideas to bring those into play in an organization. So 3-speed IT really helps you get to 1 speed, and that's just called FASTER. So that's the end of the webinar. What I'd like to do now is take questions from the team. Doug, you should have received questions from people, hopefully, and we can take some of those questions as they come up.
Sure. Eric, the first question we have is, at what level in the organization would the role of the Agile governance owner fit? Senior management, middle management, advisory role?
That's a great question. To be successful, it's got to be somebody that is a trusted senior person in the organization. So I would say it's a senior executive of some kind, you know, VP level, managing director level, director even. But they have to be able to play at the C-level suite of the enterprise all the way down to the team level. So it's probably somebody that's either been in those roles and isn't anymore, or is a trusted advisor that can navigate all those tiers of the organization. That's a very good question.
And this, our second question came in from someone who joined us a little bit late, so he apologized if he fully covered it. But he's wondering, how do you compare scaled Agile governance process with the SAFE framework?
I think that this is So SAFE, of course, describes how to implement that an Agile process at scale. What I don't find that SAFE does is address as explicitly the mechanics of driving governance in conjunction with the SAFE Agile process. So SAFE is the Agile process at scale. This is the corresponding Agile governance process that would help make SAFE successful or more successful where SAFE is being deployed. So it's not a competitive framework. It's complement. That's another good question.
And we had just had a third question come in. And what does specific governance working group consist of? And do they have separate sprint teams along with governance owners?
So a governance working group, as I use that kind of term in the course of this webinar, oftentimes there are standing bodies, standing governance bodies. So let's say there's an enterprise architecture group and a enterprise architecture governance team, right? So it's some kind of an architecture review board construct. Beneath the ARB, you might have a governance working group focused on cloud governance. You might have a separate one focused on data things. You might have a separate one focused on big data analytics or mobile or whatever. So those are working groups whose task is to address the specific governance requirements of a domain or a subdomain, solve those governance problems, and then those governance frameworks get adopted and incorporated back into the EA governance framework, and that working group would disband. So that's what I mean by governance working group. And so, in larger organizations, you may have to navigate multiple working groups to get the various governance decisions made. So, and now imagine I'm a sprint team, I'm working on the tasks that I've committed to during sprint planning, and now suddenly I have an emergent governance requirement that touches or involves multiple of these working groups plus the normal enterprise governance processes. That's where the friction and the angst and the uncertainty comes into play. So that's what I mean by the working groups. They are more tightly associated with those top-down prescriptive IT boards. I hope that answered it.
Wonderful.
If not, send an email.
Thanks, Eric. That was our last question. So, Eric, if you don't have anything else, I can conclude today's webinar.
I want to thank everybody for attending. This is an exciting area, and we encourage your feedback on the model when you get the white paper, because it's a work in progress and it's new. So if anybody that's attended has ideas on how to improve it, to implement it, whatever, I'd love to have the discussion as a follow-up.